when it is available. They don't understand the subjective experience, the personal experience of living with the disease and not wanting to take medication which they think would slow down their creativity, would alter their lives with side effects. That's why tonight is such a special night. In society, in the year 2013, we are able to, in San Diego, California, talk about mental health issues in public, at a public forum, at a cafe. That would not have been the case 10 years ago in Milwaukee, Wisconsin, where I come from. It just wouldn't be the case. I've been to the hospital 6 times in the last year. I did not want to wish that at all. When I developed mental health condition, unlike when you break your arm and you get a cast, and your family members rush to the hospital to sign the cast, when you're diagnosed with a mental health condition, your friends and family run in the other direction as fast as they can. I've been ostracized by most of my family. There's a small select group of people that are still with me after 20 years. They do not understand that bipolar disorder is a physical, mental problem with your brain that manifests itself psychologically in the form of behavior. Oftentimes, some people I know or run across that are professionals practicing medicine or psychology or social workers that have said, I'm just feeling a little bit too good today. I need some lithium. Well, that loses its appeal if you're actually on lithium. I have a unique perspective on bipolar disorder. My father has it. I grew up with it. So there's the psychological damage, and then there's the chemistry and the biologic and the genetics which I inherited from my father. He got bipolar disorder from his aunt who had schizophrenia. Because from what I've studied and what I know, there is a link on some level between schizophrenia and bipolar. Some of the symptoms are the same. Some of the behaviors are the same. When I was in the hospital, what was most frustrating is trying to explain to the people in there that I've studied for 10 years mental health, and I know more than they do about the condition that I have. And they're trying to treat me for it. They just load more drugs onto me. Let's be real about the hospitals. Their number one goal is to get you in there and get you out of there in 72 hours. They don't care how sick you are. If you have Medi-Medi, Medi-Cal, Medicare, they'll let you stay for a month. Or good private insurance. But even with Medi-Cal, I was ushered out of there after 3 days, only to come back 3 days later. It's not right. One of the reasons I'm doing this tonight is that if one person can realize a little bit about what things are like, from my perspective, maybe they can relate to that and feel like they're not alone. Because we're not alone. We represent about 2% of the general population. That means if you go to Qualcomm Field for a football game, you got like 6,000 to 8,000, maybe 2,000 to 4,000 on a given day that are people that have manic depression. I like to call it manic depression because I think that captures it better. Bipolar disorder implies that you're either on one end or the other, South Pole, North Pole. Manic depression implies, or to me, I feel like it implies, that you're both manic and depressed at the same time. Because a manic episode is inherently still depression, which is coming out as mania. That mania is not self-esteem. That mania is ego, arrogance, and entitlement. It's turned upside down. It's like when I had my first mixed episode, which we'll talk about in a little bit. So I had that manic episode. And then what happened? Still wasn't diagnosed, still wasn't on meds. It was 1998, it goes in, I crashed from that summer mania. A horrific depression. and then I lift up again in 99, and then I crash again in 2000, and I lift up again in 2000 and crash again in 2001, and each time it's getting worse. And I'm like, what's going on here? My mom doesn't know how to handle it. My dad, at that point, shunned me completely. That's another thing. He wouldn't acknowledge his own issues with mental health. And so therefore wouldn't acknowledge mine. Wouldn't accept that there's something that he could have passed on to me that was so horrific. So finally in 2001, I'm laying on the floor of my mom's house with a butcher knife. And my 6'2", 260-pound stepdad is having a hard time holding me down so I don't cut myself in half. And at that point, they realized that I need to go to the hospital. And here's how the doctor that diagnosed it. He sits down, I'm sitting down, he asks me 7 questions. Says, you're bipolar, you have a condition that's going to affect you for the rest of your life. I'm sorry, have a good day, I got to go meet another patient. So, he gave me lithium, which I became a camp counselor. This is a really cool story. I went and interviewed as a camp counselor, because it was May or June at that time, and I was coming out of that depression and feeling groovy again. Catching the groove, the waves of consciousness. And I took the lithium, I never took it. I put it in a suitcase, and it was like all smashed and powdery in there. And I became floridly manic. But I was running a camp program for 64 kids and 8 counselors, 8 kids per counselor. They didn't think I was manic, they just thought I was the coolest, best, brightest, most energetic camp counselor they had ever had. So if you're going to have a manic episode, doing it in a YMCA camp setting might not be a bad one to do it. Even though you're in charge for 64 kids on a canoe trip down the Fox River. So I read a book called A Mood Apart. And that book is written by Peter Wybrow. And it's about a set of twins, both from Boston, Massachusetts. One of these twins did not make it and perished. They were both diagnosed as bipolar. The other set of twins moved to San Diego and is still living here to this day. Huh. She read a book, and then, I read a book, and that book, within 2 weeks later, I was on a plane to San Diego for Milwaukee. I've been back twice in 11 years. So I just thought that if I moved here, because it's sunny every day, that I could beat this. And what I found out was it has to do with the length of, one of the factors, and I've really broke this down for myself. It's not for anyone else, but for myself, it's the solar radiation, how warm it is. It has a lot to do with it. And it's also the length of daylight. There's a threshold. Next month, in March, is like a big party for me, because once the lights turn back, since fall, spring forward, fall back, once the lights turn forward, there's an hour of daylight. And then it goes from, right now it's about 5:40, and at that time it'll go from 6 to 7 right away. The sun will be coming up at 6:30, it's almost 12 hours. And just like a cannabis plant, once you have 12 hours more of daylight, you bloom. And I'm not saying that I use cannabis regularly, I'm just saying that's just actually the closest example that I can have in the plant world. Why is bipolar disorder still around? I'm assuming everyone here at least knows about evolution or believes in it. I thought about that. I thought about why has it, stuck around? And I thought, maybe nature's paying a heavy price for nature. I also thought when people are hypomanic or manic, they get hypersexual. Maybe that's one of the ways the genes passed on. I mean, seriously. Even Darwin had a struggle with that. And I'll get into anxiety a little bit later. The only anxiety I felt up to this point was just bipolar anxiety, and I'll explain the difference. Medication in winter of 2002 at the UCSD Gifford Clinic. Somebody finally convinced me to take medication. It was Dr. Andres Shola. I'll never forget that guy. I got on Depakote, I got on Zyprexa, I got on Zoloft. I think that was it at the time. And at that point, when I was on medication finally, I felt a little bit of stability. And what I'd like to ask Brad to play is Till It Rains Again. Yeah. What this will describe is sort of looking over your shoulder, being somewhat stable, but knowing how it's been and knowing how it might be in the past. It's that level of uncertainty that anyone with a mental health condition goes through. When could this happen again? Why does it happen to me? When could this happen again? So, hit it.
Cool. This is a song I wrote called Till It Rains Again.